Hello, everyone, and hello,
Hello,
Nickeshia.
hello.
So, welcome to DCD's Discover Dance Dialogues. This is a new edition where Dr. Emilie Jabouin, will be interviewing Nickeshia Garrick. And we'd like to first acknowledge that we are in currently in Tkarón, Turtle Island, which is a land of human activity and dance for over tens of thousands of years. And it is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit, Haudenosaunee, and Métis people. And that ceremonial dances, traditional dances had been banned here for a very long time. I, in particular, am a descendant of African peoples from Haiti on the island of Quisqueya, and also known as Haiti. And I am currently residing in Toronto. And so I'm here with Nickeshia, and we're both dance artists. I'm also operating and facilitating today as dance historian and facilitator for Dance Collection Dance. And so we'll be discussing dance, performance arts, and more. And so we'll just ask you to please make sure you have your mic muted because this will be recorded. And so you'll be able to have access to the conversation on DCD's YouTube channel.
Yes.
So, hello, Nickeshia, and thank you
Hello.
so much for joining us.
Oh my God, thank you for having me.
So, in some of our conversations, you mentioned that you are the black sheep of your family.
Oh, yes.
And I really like that statement because I think it also reflects your work
Yeah,
and how you
very much
operate
so.
in this world, just based on the years that I've known you so
Yes.
far.
Yeah.
So tell us, if you could share with us how that is, that you're
Yeah.
the black sheep of your
Yeah.
family.
Well, my identity, for one, being queer, I identify as queer, and openly queer, unapologetically queer. Um, and and so and also I grew up very Christian. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that anymore. I definitely respect it. My family is Christian. My mom, dad, my sister, they're all very Christian. And I consider myself spiritual. And my belief really stems toward or delves into the idea of ancestry and honoring those who were here before us. Also honoring the land. I really focus on the elements: fire, water, earth, air, and spirit, self. Um, and and in that we are also creators,
Mhm.
right? We also build, we create. So we also have that knowledge, that power, that capacity. Um, and so in that's why I consider myself the black sheep of the family, because I really challenge the belief systems of my family, um, and I really challenge their ideas of what the world is, right,
Mhm.
and how they view things. And so for me, this really it's very significant, and it really applies to the work that I do and my research, in that I believe that we should challenge the way that people think, in a respectful way, right?
Mhm.
We don't always have to agree, but can you open up your view of the world, right,
Mhm.
to something else or to someone else's view, and see other, as
Right.
opposed to just your own lived experience, of course. And so this is why I really, really love performance art, and
Mhm.
specifically Black performance art, because I believe it's consciously challenging, so on purpose, so
Mhm.
consciously challenging um, how people view the world, the status quo, consciously challenging the status quo, right? So and showing them that, yeah, Black art is relevant, Black art is here, it is important. You can you can view the world through our eyes as well, and you can
Mhm.
see through our eyes and through our experiences. And so this is how I challenge my family. This is how I challenge folks who witness my art and perceive my art.
Mhm. Thank you. And like the reason also I was excited
Yeah,
about how you presented yourself is because I feel like there's a radical honesty
yeah,
in your response in saying I'm an openly queer
yeah.
Black person, and also in terms of performance art that also overlaps with dance, there's a sense of we're able to challenge also not necessarily with words.
Hmm.
So what does that, and in a sense, I'm asking you also like how did you come to dance, or how, why dance
Yes.
essentially?
Well, I mean, okay, if we're going, let's go back to the beginning.
Sure.
When I was a child, my mom would say that I would always walk on my toes. And so she's like, there's something in you, there's someone around you that is telling you to just walk on your toes, walk like a dancer, walk around, and it's how I expressed myself. I I actually, as a child, was quite mute. I didn't speak much, actually. But my mom said I was always very expressive within my body.
Nice.
And now fast forward to now, I always say that's where my intellect lies,
Mhm.
right? It is very embodied. And so this is how I communicate, right? My communication is through my energy, the energy that is built within my body when I move,
Mhm.
right? And I want to share that energy with you. And this is how I express myself. That is my form of
Mhm.
expressivity. Um, that is my form of intellect. And so that's where that connection was. It was thankfully my mom saw that from
Mhm.
from when I was so young. And that's how I then understood this is how I communicate. This is how I challenge, right? This is how I speak, right? It's very embodied.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice. And do you feel like dance uh is already part of performance arts,
Mhm.
or do you feel like performance arts is already in dance? Like what is that conversation for you?
Yeah, for me, because I love to do so many things, right? I have so many disciplines, right, that I rely on that help to make up who I am as an artist. And so in that, I found that there is more flexibility within performance art because I'm not just a dancer, I'm not just an actor, I'm not just a singer or creator, so on and so forth. I love freedom. With anything that I do, I
Mm,
need a sense of freedom,
mm,
or that I'm always striving for that level of freedom. How can I openly share all that I am? So in that, I believe that I've always been a performance artist, honing specific disciplines, right? But that base of me wanting that freedom and being able to openly share all that I am,
mhm.
I think lies in performance art. So yeah, I do. For me, I do think it is interchangeable.
Okay.
Because I've seen pieces that are considered just dance,
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh no, that's definitely for me
Mm,
performance art category because it's challenging. It's
yes.
challenging how we think of dance, that specific form, right? So for me, when I'm like, it's always when I witness something that is considered just dance or considered acting, but it's also challenging the art form itself, or it's pushing the envelope of that art form. Um, I'm like, that's performance art to me,
Okay,
in my
so
mind. Yeah,
no, definitely. I,
yeah.
I I know that when people see my work, for example,
Hmm.
they've tended to say, "Oh, your work is very theatrical."
See, yeah,
And
yeah.
I find that interesting because to me, that's just dance.
Hmm.
Like my dancing will have
I see what you're
singing and
saying. I see.
storytelling,
Yeah,
right? So, but it's
yeah.
not to say that your point isn't right on,
Oh,
especially in the
no, of course,
context in
of
which we
course.
are in.
Yeah,
Because like in this context,
yeah.
in this Western context of dance, that yeah, I guess yeah, the labels maybe don't apply in the way that we want
Thank you.
to live
Yeah,
our art.
that's how I feel. That's how I
Right.
feel. I need the freedom to be more than just a dance artist or just an actor, because I'm all of that. I think all of us, I think we all encompass that,
Right.
especially us as performance artists, right? Or performing artists. Yeah, we encompass so many things. There are so many different, like we're multidisciplinary
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
Right.
And could you give us a definition of what is performance arts to you?
Yeah, I mean, just what I was saying now, in the sense that I performance art for me is something that challenges, again, the status quo, how we think, how we move, how we are, our being, our very being, our essence, right? For me, performance art is another layer of vulnerability. It is another layer of authenticity. Performance art is an open book for me. Personally, I'm bringing a sense of truth, um, that, and a hidden truth that normally most people would be afraid to showcase. But that's exactly what I want to bring forward. Performance art to me is political, right? It is purposeful. So
Okay.
yeah.
And when you say hidden truths, so what comes to mind for me is, for example, I love that term because in dance, especially when I just started, there was a sense of you have to portray something. And as I started developing my own work, and even as I was doing other people's work, I started to really aim for like actually being present in the story.
Of course.
And so, but then I remember also choreographers would say like, oh, make sure you don't do this, or like don't cry on stage, or
oh, I've heard that so many times. Yeah.
Whereas performance arts, to my understanding, is also like actually using your body, telling a story, but doing things. So,
Yes.
like if you're breaking the cup, you actually come and break the cup, maybe.
Oh, yeah,
right? Instead of in dance, you would, maybe pretend like you have a cup and break.
Yes, 100%.
So tell us more about this hidden truth
Yeah.
that you want to explore in your work, or that you explore in your work.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly that. I'm just going to piggyback off of what you were saying in terms of my emotionality, right? In real life, outside of the stage, I should say, outside of me being on stage, I often hold in my emotions. I would be considered someone who's, rather stoic, right? And I can, obviously I'm an emotional person, right? My art shows that. But yeah, I always I walk around the world holding, myself together in a specific way. And I mean, of course, there's so many reasons as to why that is, being, femme presenting and being Black and having to hold so many so many stories and having to hold space for so many other people, and being the strong Black woman, and we know how that goes. So that's how I've held myself in this world, right? But the paradigm that I want to create on stage is showing you what's deep inside,
right?
What I don't show in real life, right? What I hold inside is what I want to bring forward and bring to the surface, right? What the aching of my inner child, I want to bring to the surface, right? That's what I mean.
Okay. And so in this current work that you're exploring,
Yes.
or even in your past works,
Yes.
whatever you would like to share, what has the process been, or what, is maybe an example of you bringing your inner child forward? Like how, and this question is more like, what does that look like for you?
Yes.
What is that to bring your inner child forward? on the stage?
For sure, healing my inner child. That's what it is. It's finding moments of what is it that I really wanted when I was 5 or 6 years old? What do I remember? What excited me?
Mm-hmm.
What scared me, right? Um, what was I confronted with as a child? And remembering that and telling those stories and bringing those stories forward. That inner child and that little child who was silenced, right? Who couldn't really speak up or defend self, who couldn't really articulate as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Remembering that and then and being the superhero for myself, right? That's what I want to bring. That's what the inner child is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for saying that, for two reasons. The first, because I'm hearing you say you healing is about bringing forward our vulnerabilities, and it's
Mm-hmm.
also about talking about issues that are relatable,
Yes.
that are
Yes.
worldwide.
That yes.
And also because I'm gonna maybe ask a difficult
Yes,
question
please.
about what was that experience what do you think were the experiences in your childhood that had you be so quiet?
Mm-hmm. Well, growing up in a Caribbean household, right, there is a certain way that we have to carry ourselves, right? It's, to be seen but not heard, right? So we have to uphold this idea that we are doing well, that there's a level of perfection. And I mean, of course, that has to do with the stresses of being Black in, I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods and went to predominantly, schools that were very white. And so this idea of safety was, being Black, safety was being silent, doing what I needed to do to be safe, dressing a specific way, speaking a specific way. And so that's, it's not, it's for me also, I want to say it's not putting blame on my parents or anything, as that they did what they did to make sure that I was safe and to make sure that my sister was safe as well. Um, growing up in the neighborhoods that we did. So and of course due to racism. So if I acted in a specific way, um, and looked a specific way and spoke a specific way, I was safe.
Mhm.
Right. And so that understanding that, and so not being too loud,
Mm.
you're not being too
Interesting.
boisterous, not being too opinionated,
Mhm.
right, kept me safe as a Black person. So that's where the silencing came. And so now growing up and being able to actually understand that and being able to articulate that, the work that I do is very loud.
Mhm.
It is very in your face on purpose, because that is the inner child that wanted to be loud and to be more colorful and to be more creative. And I was able to do that on stage,
Nice.
right? That was my outlet. And so that's where that stems from. It was safety, and I understand it. As a child, with my parents telling me to be a certain way, and I couldn't understand it. So of course I was angry at them.
Mm.
But I realized it wasn't them. It's the world, and that's how it is. Silencing Black people, silencing Black voices. So silencing Black creativity.
Mhm.
So that's where
Okay.
it stems from.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that radical honesty.
Yeah.
And also I'm wondering how that radicalness and loudness is tied to your current work and your current research.
100%. Well, the work that I'm delving into now, which is so near and dear to my heart, is about Black performance art from the 1960s to now. with a specific focus on Turtle Island. And the socio-political, cultural, and artistic movements that have informed and also came out of Black performance art. And in that, just researching a lot about right now, I'm really super focused on the Black settlements that are within Canada. And of course, there's one Black settlement that a lot of us mostly know, which is Africville in Nova Scotia. Sorry, I'm just coming over a little cough.
Yeah, you can.
I'm just like as I'm trying to talk and clear my throat at the same time. Sorry.
That's fun. I think it's.
I love that we were both drinking. That was like that's performance art. Yeah. Both taking the time, being like, you know what, we need a moment. Yes. We're both going to drink at the same time.
Yes.
I love that. That was so choreographed. Anyway, I'm really focused on, I digress. I'm really focused on, the Black settlements. And so the one that's mostly known is Africville in Nova Scotia. And then there are two other settlements, and there's so many more, the Black settlements, but there are two others that I'm really fascinated by as well. There's Amber Valley in Alberta.
Okay.
And then there's northern Buxton in Ontario, which hopefully next month I'm going to visit. That is the idea, and continue my research there in an energy exchange, because I would love to interview the curator. There's a museum in Buxton, Ontario. And so I would love to interview the curator there, and then speak to the people of the land. And again, energy exchange, meaning for me, actually building a relationship with the people. So it's not just a one-off, like this is for my research, hi and bye. No, absolutely not. Part of my research is also about building relationships with these Black folk on this land, and how they lived. And they had full autonomy, right? They were able to have their own schools, right? Their own, their own education, their own shops, everything. And it was all Black owned. And it's, to me, that is so amazing, because that isn't spoken about enough when it comes to the history of Canada, right? We had that autonomy for a long time. For a long time. So that isn't new.
Right.
Right. And so I want to bring that into my research, because, it shouldn't be considered radical at all, but apparently it is.
Right.
Because we are just taught of how, our freedom has been stripped away from us. But here I am doing this research and being shown, hey, we had places on this land that were our own. And so that's what I want to bring forward into the work. And so this is why I keep bringing up the word freedom.
Right.
Right. Not like the being captured and being enslaved. Okay, we know that. We know that. Freedom, and what that means, and what that looks like. Right. And so this is why it's so important for me to go to these lands and interview the people, and ask them simply what that level of freedom looked like, and what that is for you now, and what that means now. Yeah.
And also because the freedom and autonomy, I mean, given that, my research has also looked at Black histories in Canada. Especially from the late 19th century to the early 20th. And so definitely the sort of irony there is that because Black people were segregated, and because we were essentially marginalized from society, we had our networks.
Yes, we did.
Right, so we had maybe not many doctors, but we had our own doctors, our businesses, because people couldn't go to like a regular hotel or go to specific areas. And so you had Black owned of everything.
Everything.
Yeah,
Everything.
so that's great. And I believe you're talking about the Buxton Historical Society.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Right. And so who will you be interviewing?
So there's a curator there, Michelle, who I want to reach. I still haven't reached out to yet, but I've drafted the email, so it's there. I'm just looking it over, making sure that it sounds great. But yes, I do want to reach out to her. And then in that, I would love to, take her to dinner and ask her more about other folks that are on the land that are descendants of the original folks who landed there in the 1800s. And so that would be really lovely to speak with the elders, right? And the descendants of the original folks who came there. And it was great. And with Buxton specifically, what I love is they had a lot of white abolitionists who actually helped them and bought the land and brought over, right? Those who were enslaved in the US, bringing them over to Canada. And so that relationship as well, right? With the white abolitionists and the Black folk actually helping to build up the community. Right. I'm really fascinated by that.
Right.
To see that, oh, right, that does exist. That did exist, right? So, so I'm like, what of now? Why is there always so much friction? Right.
Right. And
so.
I'd add also that I think that's your approach to performance arts will give space to the complexity of those relationships. Because I also even in thinking about, as you talk about freedom, like the idea or the networks of the Underground Railroad that were white abolitionists, Black abolitionists, Black revolutionaries, and Indigenous people, right? Who made it even possible
for us
to like find these routes and be able to make our way. The communities, for them to be able to make their way into Canada. And also I think, like, I'm sure you'll possibly run into like also the dichotomies of like segregation, racism still exists and existed.
Of course.
But then how does the conversation of solidarity come into that? Then and now. Because you're also doing research on 1960s, which is like such a pivotal time for Blackness. In many places in the world, including in North America.
Specifically within North America, because right now I'm currently researching the Black Power movement in the 1960s that happened in Montreal. Right? And so, and there of course there was levels of solidarity there, right? With white abolitionists and so on and so forth. And of course the friction. And so all of that, like those levels of solidarity, those levels of friction all show up in my work as well, right? I'm not negating any of that, any of the experiences at all, because that's not what it's about. It's about bringing forth that truth, that level of truth, right? But that's why the focus starts with the 60s,
right?
Because as you said, it is such a pivotal moment. So much was happening, right, within North America and specifically within Toronto as well. And so that is what I'm fascinated by. That is what I'm fascinated by. And there was so much that we as Black people and specifically within the Black diaspora that we were saying. There was so much that we were saying. We were out on the, just like now, it really hasn't changed. But what we were rallying for, just our rights, right? Just to be seen as people, right? Like the idea of that is not even equity, just to be seen as human, right? Which is wild to me. But we weren't even seen as human first, right? So that to me hits me on such an intrinsic level. To not even be seen as human is insane to me. So that's anyway, that's what really brought me that's what really propelled me to the 60s specifically,
Okay.
right?
And I want to like probe you more
Yeah.
in saying, because these Black revolutionary movements,
Mhm.
I like what I've observed is that from the like early, whether it's even the 1800s
Yes.
into the 20th
Yeah.
century,
Yeah.
are actively asking, or not asking, but requiring that we are viewed as human.
Yeah.
But I think that like there's something about the 60s that ties to your research. Like,
Yeah.
what is it specifically in the 60s in relationship to performance arts that drew you in?
Yeah. And that is actually still what I'm researching,
Okay,
because
nice.
that's very funny that you asked that, because and I only say that because in the 60s it's very difficult. I found it very difficult to find performance artists
Okay.
that um within the books that I've been researching and reading, I'm finding a lot of work from Black performance artists from the 70s and 80s.
Mm.
But with the 60s, I'm realizing that I have to interview
Mm.
people. So that is actually the goal of mine, is to actually start interviewing people,
Right.
because it was in the 60s, it was so underground. And this is what I'm hearing from a lot of people.
Mm.
It was very underground, which is amazing because I love that. But I'm finding that's where I'm having trouble right now. So in that, and I should say I'm having trouble within Toronto or within
Right.
Canada.
Right.
There's a lot from the States,
Mm.
right? But I want my focus here within
Mhm.
Canada specifically. So I know that it exists. It's there. But I'm just finding, yeah, that's where I'm stuck right now.
Mm.
So I'm gonna get there. And this is why I want to, and this is why I want to actually start doing interviews
Nice.
within this next part of my research right now, because I've been in the books and I'm like, okay, time to actually take action and go to those places and speak with the people. But I know for sure, because a lot of those socio-political movements were starting to become very heightened again within the 60s. I know a lot of artistry came from that as well. I just need to find it. And I just need to figure out, who to speak with. So I do have some folks in mind to speak with, but yeah.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
that's what, yeah, this is
Yeah.
where I'm very excited, because I'm like, I want to know and I want to delve deeper into that, and I want to bridge that gap.
Right.
This is why I'm also doing that research, because I'm like, I know it exists. It's just, it's not readily available in a book right now. So I'm like, okay, that's where I come in, because I want to make that available. I want to make that more accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, when I think of the 60s, I think about a lot of public protests.
Yes.
Or like people just being in public
Yeah.
spaces and sitting and building a counterculture
Yeah.
as they are
Yeah.
gathering.
Yep.
And so I'm also thinking, wow, like I wonder how and where you're going to find the information about these acts of being.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these
Yeah.
acts of yeah, that we're not in a more boundaried institutional
Exactly.
context.
Exactly. I also think about voice singing. This is why I incorporate music or singing in my work all the time. We came together as Black people, and especially when it came to about rallying and protesting, and we came together, and we come together through song, through chanting. There is such a synergy, there's such a power, there's such magic when it comes to our voices and us chanting something together, and then creating music from that. So I might even look at some of the musicians from the 60s. In my mind, that's where I should really start to delve into, because I know a lot of the music in that time came from protesting, came from rallying together. So
Yes.
yeah, so this is great. As we're speaking, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I have an idea of where to go.
Yes.
So thank you. This is excellent. This is helping my research.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
definitely. And also, I'm hearing you almost peel and share with us different layers of yourself
Yes.
because singing is a big part of your
Oh,
practice.
it's huge. Singing is huge. So I believe that voice is healing, and specifically for me, because I've always been someone who is afraid to speak, of course, because of it. I was telling you a little bit about my history as a child and being silenced. But so speaking, just my throat chakra, I've been afraid to use, but singing has always helped me. And I find when I'm singing, how it vibrates in my body is so healing and it is so calming. And I've recognized that it is also calming when I'm singing for others. And so, yeah, I just find it very healing. And I find and that is what I want to share with others as well.
Right. And so this makes me think of, well, everything you just shared about singing makes me think of how Harriet Tubman comes to mind. And I'm thinking she was chanting, singing as she was traveling and freeing her people. And then also, whenever there's hardship and disaster, you have people singing.
100%.
I was listening to a Haitian artist who was saying that after the earthquake of 2010, people were singing in the streets, like almost as though that could like ease right, like
But
the
it does
right.
though.
Yes,
And
yes, you're right.
And I think
because
yes,
it does ease.
because it does.
Yes, yes.
Right. And I think one thing when it comes to Black people and us rallying together, we know that, right? Whether subconsciously or consciously, but we've known that, and we know that now, that chanting gathers, it mobilizes, it heals.
Right.
Right. So,
and the spirituals. And then I'm, as you're talking about the 1960s, I'm thinking that's how a lot of prominent 1960s leaders gathered people.
100%.
How you like I always have this image of like women singing in the streets during the civil rights
movements. Thank you. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly that. And also, again, when I say it calmed us down because that was scary. That act of rallying when there are police after you, police officers, police dogs, they're spraying you with water. That is terrifying. So what calms down your nervous system, knowing that we are rallying together through voice, through song, those spirituals that you were speaking of. That calms down the nervous system, right? Amidst chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in your work, do you anticipate, because I've seen your work to my past, present, future lovers. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And there wasn't singing in there, right? But or maybe there was.
I did have some humming. I
did
have some humming in that one. Yes.
Okay.
Always.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so in this new work that you're researching, do you envision like singing, humming, having a bigger
100%.
place? And also what is that role again of challenging or of there's a work that singing, as you said, does. How does that fit into, or how does that manifest itself in performance art?
Well, for me, when it comes to creation, and let's firstly start there. I start with writing.
Okay.
I start with writing, and then the words, I see the words, and music comes to mind through these words that I've written. Whether it be just humming, right? Or I'm actually putting sound or music or melody, I should say melody, to these words that I've written down, right? And these words that I've written, yeah, especially because the work that I'm focused on now is called the ties that bind us, the ties that bond us. And so I'm really focused on rope, right? And the idea of lineage and traveling and storytelling, literally from womb or belly button, connecting my belly button through this rope to yours, to any, right? Our own lived experiences. And how that connects us and how that also alienates us, right? So if I extend this rope to you, it's either you take it or you cut it, right? And so rope is that causes a lot of friction if I tie myself up, right? That challenge there, right? Or if I hit myself with it. Or if I spread it along the floor in a specific pattern, that all tells a story. And so this idea of rope and the music that's coming from this idea of rope and of tying, of bonding, of binding, yeah, that to me, I think is what creates a sense of peace, but also a sense of friction. And that ties in for me with the idea of performance art. So yeah, I've been working a lot with rope right now and creating music surrounding that. And just the sound of rope hitting against the floor, hitting against my body, right? That all is sound, that all can then be transformed into melody, that all can then be transformed into music creation. I always use, I love props. I'm a very proppy person with my work always, because I love the idea as well of installation. With my work, especially recently, I always have some form of an installation.
Nice.
Has to be. I'm also very visually guided for me, right? And that's so it's very selfish for me. I need visuals, right? And so that's what I also bring forward, right? And for me, it's just something else. It's another medium that I can connect with, right? It's another way that I can express my creativity, right? Building. I always build my own sets with my solo work. I always build my own sets, right? And so again, it's just this beautiful vision of rope, like hanging and what that means and what does it sound like? The friction of it against my skin, all of that, right? That's to me is very performance art.
And as you're speaking, and because we've talked about spirituality and everything in between,
and everything in between, yes.
It also makes me think of our spiritual bonds.
Yes.
So with lovers, with family, with ancestors, and I think, like, I want to say that most people don't maybe know how to access those bonds. Sometimes we have these ties and we don't know that we're tied.
Yes.
And and most people don't know how to untie them.
Yes.
So how does that I guess I'm also curious about like why rope versus any other type of way to be bonded.
Right. Well, rope for me, I love the idea of twine, right? And just for me, because it's the feeling.
Okay.
Like literally the sensation, the sensation of the twine against the body. And I think of rope also, if I delve deeper, I think of lynching. I think of how we as Black bodies were hung from trees.
Yes.
So and how that was used to harm us. And so for me, I'm like, how can I transform that, or or transmute that harm into something else, into something that is maybe less harmful. I don't want to say beautiful, because the idea of the rope for me is still very painful. So I don't want to say beauty, but just into something else.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where the idea of rope came from.
Okay.
The imagery of, I mean, it's very devastating, and it's very grotesque, but the imagery of Black bodies hanging from trees.
Strange fruit.
Strange fruit. And thank you for saying that. I was thinking strange fruit, right? And so that's where that comes from.
Okay.
That grotesqueness, that's where that comes from for me. And so that's the ties that bind us, the ties that bond us, ultimately is talking about how we are literally bound, right? Black folk of the diaspora, through enslavement, through pain, through this idea or sense of fighting, constantly fighting for more, grappling for more, needing to survival mode constantly, right? But then how can we change that into healing? Can we heal that level of intergenerational trauma? Can we heal that our anger? Can we heal that individually? Can we heal that together?
Or how?
How?
Right? Because,
yes, how? Yeah.
Because we've had discussions where we both agreed that it's not can, but it's
yes.
we can.
We can.
And
it does exist. How do we do that?
How do we do it
How
best
do we
also?
do best? How do we do it best?
Right.
And so that's how we bond.
Right.
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 We're bound through that pain, but we can bond through healing. And so that's where that title came from, and that's where the idea of the rope comes from.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And also when I think of rope, when I started working with my mentor, Nickeshia Garrick, he would talk, well, first he told me you have to learn how to drum before you learn any of the like rhythms and dances and movements. And he would talk about the drum and talk about all the different aspects of it. So he talked about the wood, he talked about the ceremony that led to cutting the trees. He talked about the rope that is traditionally made of cotton. Right? So then when we think of because you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that, or the conversation, that you are connected to like elements.
Yes.
And to, so, and it's also your work with the land in relationship to the land is about like all these different aspects.
Yeah.
So it made me think of, well, there's also the rope as cotton that is tied to the Black body, that is tied to the tree, that is tied to the ground, the soil, right?
Yeah.
So although it is like horrific, it's also like this interesting reconnection to the land that is like reaffirmed.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I'm also thinking, well, that's why when I think of when I think of, that's a reminder. When I think of your work, CinnaMoon's work, and other Indigenous artists' work who work with the land, it's really that reconnecting with that whole history, that ancestry, the possibility of, as you say, through that bondage or that bond, healing. Being in conversation.
That's what it comes to.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I want to bring forward. Right. That and it's so beautiful how you said that cycle of it always comes back to the land. And so the land, if the land is healing, right? And it's always healing us, right? So that how do we continue to heal and also heal the land as well, right? It's very reciprocal. And so in that connection, that actual physical connection, bound connection with myself and ancestor, with myself and land, with myself and you, and it's that interchange between like healing and finding just finding ways that we can heal, finding ways that we can heal self, that finding ways that we can heal together, right? And so and also understanding that we are really very connected, all of us. We are quite connected, all of us. And so that's also what I want to bring forward, that my story isn't unique. It's not like, it's we all have stories like this.
Right.
We all have stories like this. So this is what I really want to bring to the forefront as well. That this idea that we are so separated really shouldn't be.
Right.
It really, not in my mind, that doesn't make sense. And this is also why I'm bringing in the idea of that rope, right? We are actually tied together energetically. We are tied together. So that's, yeah, it's all connected, literally and figuratively. It's all connected for me. And so that's why I love visuals, because that's where the rope comes in. So that maybe you can understand that a little bit better if you actually physically see that rope and understand that bond, understand how we are tied together. Yeah.
And would you like to give an example of a time when you really felt like your audience or people who were present with you in your performance responded in that way? Like really acknowledged that relatability.
That's beautiful, because this is great, because we were having a conversation about this. And so I had done a piece to my past, present, and future for Dusk Dances. And again, it has a lot to do with my queerness, with my Blackness, with my relationship to ancestor, with my relationship to ancestor through land, with my relationship to spirit. And so after I had finished the piece, it was really beautiful. Folks were coming up to me, and I had a white woman come up to me saying ultimately that she could see herself through my story, through my eyes, which drew me to tears, because growing up, something as simple as watching television, and I have to find myself and try to find my story and try to relate through sitcoms and shows that are predominantly white, right? I had to find a way to relate to someone with blonde hair and blue eyes, and it was very rare that you would have shows or stories or sitcoms where it was predominantly Black. Now, they existed, like Family Matters, or right, but they were few and far in between. And so it was really beautiful, fast forwarding to just recently, having this white woman say, "Oh, I actually now see myself through you," where our stories are now at the forefront, and folks who are non-Black can relate to our work. Wow. That I was never expecting that. So this is the significance for me with the work that I do. Everyone can be able to relate, right? And should be able to, if you can find pieces of yourself. Right? And that reminds me literally of some of the text of one of the shows that I did, the show that you saw, To My Past, Present, and Future, Lovers, I'm Sorry. And I said pieces of myself, right? Everyone should be able to find pieces of themselves in other people's work,
Mm-hmm.
right? In other people's story, I believe.
Yeah,
That's my belief.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what art is about. That's
I
what
think so.
our work as dancers, also as
Yeah.
performers. And so is there a song maybe from your work or from words of your work or from past work that you would like to share or like lead us in singing with you?
Oh, that is beautiful. Oh my gosh. Well, there for my artist talk, I opened with drumming and I opened the space with song. And these are just, I often love to use like sounds. So not necessarily words, but just sounds that come to me. And so with this one, it goes like this. Wale wale say de 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 wale wale say de. Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our conversation.
Yes.
I wish I wanted to keep singing, but
I know because there's more, but
or
I
maybe we'll
realize
do
there's
that
we've run out of time.
off camera.
Yes.
But thank you so much to our audience members. Thank you so
Yes.
much to the people who will listen
Yes.
later.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Nickeshia.
Thank you.
That was really like such a full, powerful, beautiful share.
Thank you.
I really appreciated everything you shared. And
Awesome.
so what well, let us know, how can we follow you? How can we find you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess social media. I know, I always feel so weird being like, yeah, socials. You can follow me on my socials, like I'm an influencer or something like that. No. Yeah, no, yeah, I'm always not always, I'm not the best at keeping up with social media, but I try to keep folks informed with what I'm doing. So at Just Keely. Keely is my nickname on Instagram, so you can find me there. That's quite, or just under Nickeshia Garrick on Facebook.
Okay.
It's really great.
And do you have a website as well, or?
No, I don't personally have a website quite as yet. I have not, done that, but I will get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.